Well, here we are again. Now, what a difference a short period of time makes. And I can only say to you that what you're going to hear in this video is probably going to be a little shocking. And there is a little pre-homework, if you will. Forgive me for the darkness. I'm not trying to find a bunch of light tonight. If you haven't read it yet, I want you to go and read the post that's on my page right now that has a picture of a Ku Klux Klansman playing chess with a brother. This is a very, very important piece of what I would like to call journalism that I want everyone who watches this to read, because it's something that's so terribly important for you to understand, especially as it relates to what the first video that I posted earlier today was about and what this video is about. Because tonight I'm talking about distraction. See, that's really what our problem is. When I hear the question, what should we do? I always try to follow it up with the idea that we need to be taking action. But the problem is, and I've said this before, there's so much going on right now that we get distracted by all the stuff happening. So it's hard for us to stay focused on the goal. And that's what really is going on right now. Before I got ready to do this video, I did a bunch of research in order to try to find some of the distractions that have kept us busy. And I wasn't going to read the list because of what I just posted, and I wanted everybody to kind of get involved with that. But before I get there, let me talk a little bit about this list of distractions. I went out and I found the top 10 news stories from 2013. And this is by Yahoo's account, and this is ultimately what we were searching for, we as a people who were online. Number 10 was Paula Deen. Number 9 was the death of Madiba, Nelson Mandela, for those who don't know. The number 8 search story, Pope's quitting and Pope's being elected. Number 7 was the North Korean missile crisis. Do you remember that? I had actually kind of forgotten about that. Interesting how we get distracted, right? Number 6 was Syria. The number 5 issue was the George Zimmerman acquittal. Number 4 was the royal baby birth. 3 was the Boston bombing, and of course the search for the two crazies. The number 2 search story of 2013 was Obamacare, and the number 1 story searched in Yahoo News last year was the Jodi Arias trial, right? That was the girl that stabbed the guy 37 times. Now that's just the top 10 from Yahoo, right? I actually got others. Then there was another list that came up with the Oklahoma tornadoes as number 1, the IRS scandal. Then there was the Newtown gun control debate, because you remember the Newtown incident happened right at the end of 2012. So then here we were in 2013 talking about gun control. Nothing happened. But it was a good distraction, though. Then there was the Motown City bankruptcy. Then we had a government shutdown. We had gay marriage and pot legalization, both in the Supreme Court and in, a number of different states. Then there was the ACA website debacle. Boy, wasn't that something. Great distraction. Lasted a few months. And finally, we had the Eric Snowden issue, right? I tried to then find some stuff that was race related, because I really wanted to kind of add, some race elements to this, since that's really what the focus of what I'm concerned about is that, we got to do better. We've got to do better. Well, when I went to find some, the top 10 race-related news stories, here's what I found. I'm only going to give you the top 3 because the other ones really just didn't seem to sink in. But there was the Duck Dynasty patriarch, the old man on Duck Dynasty, and what he had said. Then there was ESPN. They took up about 3 spaces because they cut about 3 or 4 people last year for making racial comments. And then, remember this one, when that plane crashed at SFO, KTVU went on air and had all those fake names. That was one of the top 10 race-related news stories of 2013. See, we're distracted. Let's just keep it real. We're distracted and we're not paying attention. And that's why we don't get things done. I mean, let's take the Sterling incident as well. That was, in fact, itself a distraction in the way that it was dealt with, handled, in the way that it's going to play out. Because if you really think about it, we just spent a whole lot of time rallying for millionaires. Now, I'm not knocking that these young men who choose to play for these owners shouldn't make a living, that they shouldn't be valued. But I am concerned that we spent the better part of 4 days in this amazingly hyper fervor that got the whole world interested and ultimately ended up in the NBA taking the action that they took and the fans and the players being ready to take their action. But did we force that kind of a change when we watched our politicians, the people that we elected, changing laws that affect each and every one of us? No. I started the Recall Them All movement on Facebook for that very reason, because I thought to myself, we cannot continue to tolerate this kind of stuff. Yet, here we are, distracted again. Well, that's when somebody in my news feed posted this article that I now have asked you all to go and read. And if you haven't done it, pause this video and go and read that article, because everything else I talk about for the next few minutes is going to all be about this idea that we're so distracted that we have allowed the three elements that this Caucasian male, and it's important to note that because this was written by a white guy. It was written by a white guy about how to control the black population. That's specifically what this article is about. And he brings up three very specific, simple points that ultimately all involve the same premise. It's about distraction, right? He begins talking about the idea that ignorance is something that they can very easily use to distract us because we don't read books. Well, that's not true of all of us. We know that. We read a bunch of books and we read a bunch of snippets online, and we like to read the griot, right? But he's right when he says that we don't engage in the way that we should. And in the 21st century, like I said in the first video about that speech I gave as an MC, we've got the most powerful tools available to us and we're not using them properly. We're not using them well, yet we want to complain. They're using them. So our ignorance is getting in the way. But then he went on to talk about greed, right? Greed, and this is something else, because there's an article I posted the other day that Questlove had written. He's writing a 6-part article on what he thinks about hip hop today. And in the first 2, he really kind of gives hip hop a hard time, talking about how it's very empty and shallow now, and that, we've accepted this new version of hip hop that ultimately is, in fact, a distraction. And that in that version of hip hop, all they're doing is talking about the idea of some unattainable level of success and wealth, and how so many of the rappers today are spending their time talking about how great they are because they've got it and they know we ain't gonna get it, right? Well, then we get out on that quest to get it. We want to look like the baller, so we buy anything. And that's that greed that he's talking about. The fact that he goes on to make a statement that I find very interesting, that, we're quick to spend money to have conventions at hotels owned by them, right? Pay them that money. Yeah, and what do we get for it? Well, okay. Let's not go too deep with this. I want to stay a little on the surface and don't want to push everybody away. But seriously, the idea that we'll buy anything is very real. And that's another distraction that we've allowed to infiltrate our society. And this isn't just about black folks either. As I said in my first video, it does not matter what color you are probably falling victim to some version of this. So his last piece was selfishness. And this one is big for me. Because I have this discussion with both black folks and with white folks, with conservatives and liberals. I can't understand how we got to the place where all of a sudden we think everybody got to where they were by themselves. That's not how it's worked. And that's not how it's going to work. We will not succeed by believing that I will do for me. If you do not reach down and pull your brother or your sister up beside you, you are failing. But you see, this is another version of a distraction, something that we like to utilize as an excuse to not do anything real, right? We get distracted by all those news items that I was talking about, by all the flashy stuff we see that we want to buy. And therefore, we don't take the proper kinds of action. Now, over this last week, we saw that happen. But the question is, will we do that for the next Trayvon?